the special meeting to address the council file that is reported also to Plum. So, and Mr. Englander, if you'd like to open the discussion on this
Great, thank you.
special meeting.
Thank you again. And I would be remiss if I did not recognize my co-author on this motion, Councilman Krikorian, as well. So thank you for that as well, because I think there are a lot of tremendous benefits, but change is difficult. And so I think with the opening comments earlier, slowing this down, making sure we do it correctly is a great opportunity, and I appreciate the positive feedback from the mayor's office on that in a previous committee meeting, wearing a different hat in the same room. With that, we in Plum brought in, we actually split the action and bifurcated the recommendations into two separate meetings. We had various stakeholder outreach meetings. We had tremendous support from the working groups, along with the developers working group through the mayor's office, VICA, CCA, the chamber, and others who were all on board and all spoke in favor as well and asked a lot of really tough questions. We made a lot of changes to the recommendations, the implementation, and so forth. Without going through the mission of what it's all about, there were several items on the recommended Plum report. I've got some technical amendments that I can go through to ask this committee for an aye vote. Ultimately, the chairman of the committee of Plum voted yes and was in favorable. So did the the vice chair, Mr. Huizar, Mr. Reyes, Mr. Huizar, and I, on all the recommendations, and both votes on the different weeks we took this item up were unanimous. There was a lot of input from, and I want to thank as well, the Director of Planning, Michael LeGrand, as well as Bud Ovram from Building and Safety. They authored a joint report on the realignment of the city departments. The joint report, which was dated April 5th, goes into great length and detail about all the benefits, particularly as it builds upon Build LA that was mentioned in the mayor's initiative to add the technological component, which is critically important to this consolidation effort as well. With that, all those benefits, again, that were mentioned by the public speakers were all brought up and then some through this process. And so I urge this committee to have an aye vote and then have a further discussion as it relates to the budget implications in the other committee and slowing the process down. But with that, if there are any questions directly for staff as it relates to it, I do have the technical amendments. They're very few, and I can either read those into the record if you'd like, Mr. Chair, or however you'd want to move forward on this.
Well, I think my preference would be that we hold this item now in committee until next week. That'll give members an opportunity to review this. You can distribute this distribute copies to the members, and then when we report back on this issue again next week, we'll be able to consider all these amendments and vote on them at that time. If that works for you, it obviously won't slow the process.
Works for me
at all. So why don't we go ahead and do that? Thank you for that, and if you could make sure that...
Absolutely, and if I could, all of the information is attached to the council file, as well as the PowerPoints, the draft organizational charts. That's all open in a transparent process to come back to the planning department. One of the things I want to emphasize, though, is the critical part is not just slowing this down. It's having a transparent process. Is one of the key recommendations that came out of Plum, and the changes from the recommendations that were submitted came from the chair as well. And it's that the chair of Plum work in coordination with the consultant and the director of planning, moving this forward, that they establish a working group, and that working group lays out and outlines all those issues and obstacles for this consolidation. It be done in a transparent manner, that they have an outreach to all the affected and impacted or beneficial departments, if you will, and that they also have a seat at the table, including labor and business groups. And so there's a tremendous effort and emphasis on a collective effort for the realignment to work with a consultant. In addition to that, to ensure true transparency, they would have regular updates on the realignment on this and the consolidation back to Plum for public comment as well as it progresses. And prior to implementation, if you couple that with the move date for the initiation of this consolidation to January 1st, and that could be a moving target depending on how those discussions unfold in committee, but that should be set forth in the budget, that the intent is then to iron out those details publicly with everybody's input around the table. So that was the key element in passing this out of Plum as well.
All right, and I think that's a very important factor in the continuation of the implementation, because it does allow a lot more opportunity for stakeholders to evaluate it and weigh in and influence the direction that we end up going in this. In that context, given the role of the consultant moving forward in considering the consolidation, I would ask that we get a report back next week in this committee on cost estimates and options for funding the consultant, with an instruction that the CAO manage the contract for that consultant, and also that we get a report with options to establish a superintendent of building position within the new department and the funding that would be necessary to provide that for that position and comply with state law requirements.
If I could, just for technical clarity, since we're adjourned and we're currently in the Budget and Finance Committee meeting of just this one item, would you prefer that to come to the full budget as a budget report back?
We're the same committee regardless of
Right.
whether in special meetings or not, and so I think it's within
It doesn't matter.
the jurisdiction of the agenda item, I think, for the chair to request that report back. But yes, we will be considering that in the context of our budget hearings next week, as well as the amendments that you've proposed today. So, yes,
So
Mr.
the
Labange.
CAO is going to manage all this, which is key, and all the affected departments will be at the table, whether the general manager, and then this new superintendent of building.
Yeah.
That's a report that I'm requesting as far as the.
I just would add, because I don't know where we're all going to end up, but safety is important. Building safety, I mean, it directs, if he's the superintendent of building safety, as far as building, that means they just want to get a building up by just building safety, like a planner. Planner has vision, building chief has safety. Just think about that, everybody, because I think it's important. Building safety and land development or whatever. But
Well,
anyway, I just think I'm just standing for safety.
I'm
People
with you.
understand
The point of this is to comply with state law requirements, so whatever we end up naming the position, as long as it complies with the state law requirements, is what we're after here. So, Mr. Kretz, anything further? on
Yeah,
this?
just to clarify, as part of this motion, are we recommending anything regarding when we actually make the change in positions? Are we intending to hire the consultant and go through the process and then make the changes rather than moving forward with what is currently budgeted and making those changes July 1st?
That was my recommendation, and that the report back reflect that none of the positions change or move, and that those dates don't even begin till January 1st.
Great.
But just for clarification, we're not even voting on that until
Right,
next
until the
week when
report
we
comes back.
get the report back.
Right, but that's the intended direction, that we do the study, have the consultant do the planning, and then we make the moves rather than doing it before
Yes.
the consultant.
Exactly right. Exactly right. All right. So if there's nothing further, members, we have 3 cards for the special meeting from Edgar Kalatian, Ann Williams, and Yegi Keshishan. So whoever gets to the mic first gets to talk.
Good evening.
Good
Eric
afternoon.
Kashishian with the Central City Association. As you know, CCA has been engaged with the city on this issue of departmental realignment because it has such a direct impact on development, something that CCA has led the charge on for many years. In addressing the budget for the new department, please recognize reality that for developers, time is money, and that for the real estate industry, it is at times cyclical, and city staff can face widely variable workloads. Therefore, we ask that you give the new department the flexibility in their budget to meet the variable work demand by allowing it to contract out for planners, engineers, and inspectors in order to manage peaks and valleys in workflow. Finally, it is critical that the city maintain its commitment to long-term planning efforts. We need budgetary assurances that work will continue full steam ahead on the comprehensive zoning code update, the creation of the downtown development code, and updates to the community plans, especially those that cover areas with high levels of economic activity. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. For the record, Mr. Kalatian has left, but representing VICA, he did submit a card in support of the proposal, and Ann Williams, also on behalf of the Central City Association, submitted a card in support of the proposal as well. Our final card is from Jim McQuiston, and then we're going to go back into our regular meeting.
Jim McQuiston. I haven't really studied this yet, but I am a Caltech professional engineer and very conscious of seismic problems in Los Angeles. And I've noticed in our work that some departments more or less kiss off seismic problems and others don't. And so there is a dichotomy between these two departments. Also, some of the department really adheres to the zoning and construction laws, and others do not. So we have a problem within the departments as well as trying to consolidate them. So I think really it'd be well advised to put this off slightly. I'm not against consolidating, but I think probably building and safety has to be the driving force if we really want safety in Los Angeles. Right now, we are not safe.
Thank you. With that, members, we will now continue the special meeting until next week, and we will resume our regularly scheduled Building and Finance, Budget and Finance Committee meeting. And I think we've completed discussion of that matter, so why don't we go ahead and bring Mr. LeGrand up in case there's anything that anyone wants to discuss about planning's budget.